Hi, Griffin, and hello to our folks back home. I'm Michelle from SCB 10X, and today I'm really excited and honored to be interviewing Griffin, the CEO and co-founder of Halliday. Griffin, thank you for your time. There is so much I want to cover, so let's dive right in. Griffin, first off, can you introduce yourself and share with us your personal journey, how you got into the Web3 space and started Halliday?
Yeah, absolutely. And then thank you for having me and hosting me today. I got my start in blockchain prior to going to university. I actually got in through an internship where I was doing software development. And my boss was actually really into crypto. And he said, Griffin, you're playing a lot of video games, so you should check out this thing called Bitcoin because it's internet money. And that was for my brief foray. But then I studied computer science at Stanford, so I got into embedded operating systems and really into systems development. And then as well, I did discrete math and cryptography. And I luckily took a class by a professor named Dan Bonnet, which is their blockchain class at university. And the first slide is crypto is the intersection of embedded systems, cryptography, and behavioral economics. The three things that I was passionate about at the time. And since then, I was naturally inclined to just jump right in. And I've been in love with the technology ever since.
Mm. And congrats on your Series A, by the way. You talked about your mission of pioneering the software era of blockchain. But can you take us back to when you first started Holiday? What was the initial mission then, and how has that mission and vision evolved and expanded today?
Yeah, so I mean, our mission originally at the company was to connect applications to on-chain commerce, and that's still very much a focus of ours, as well as creating these sort of software level abstractions to make building applications much easier. But the original impetus for the business was actually inspired by the early blockchain games that were being launched. We saw Axie Infinity become incredibly popular, and the thing that particularly fascinated me about Axie was you had real world economics happening in a virtual world. This also coincided with the movement for superstars to do concerts in virtual worlds. You have Ariana Grande doing a concert in Fortnite, right? So you have this dual trend of cultures happening in virtual spaces and economics is happening in virtual spaces. And our original mission for the company was to connect applications to these sort of virtual economic hubs via the blockchain. And so we originally started down that pathway and uncovered a lot of more structural problems with blockchain, such that it's incredibly hard to build any sort of blockchain service. But we're still very much focused on connecting applications to on-chain commerce and making it much easier to build on-chain applications in the first place.
Yeah, that takes me to my first question about your product roadmap. Talk to us about your initial product, Payments. That was actually how we discovered Holiday. And could you give the audience like an introduction about Holiday Payments and the problem statement that you are solving for?
Absolutely. So when you build a blockchain application, one of the first questions you have to answer is, how do my users get started? How do they spend their first dollar in my application? And the problem we're solving for is that accepting a payment as a blockchain application is very difficult and very fragmented. Users can have funds in a crypto wallet on a different chain, in a different currency. They can have their own local currency in a bank account. They can have crypto or their currency attached to a centralized exchange. So there are all these different methods and places where people store money and store some form of value. And for a developer who wants to accept the payment, prior to our product, they had to go out and integrate 10, 30, 50 components, build all of this plumbing to connect those sources of value to their application. And we saw this problem over and over and over again. We have a client, DeFi Kingdoms, who's on an Avalanche subnet, right? And they wanted their users to to on-ramp to their chain. Well, they would have had to integrate the on-ramp, the bridges, the dexes, the different chains, all the intermediate routing layers. So doing this is incredibly expensive. And so what we did is we said, hey, we're going to integrate all of these different ways to pay. So centralized exchanges, on and off ramps, dexes, different blockchains, sources of tokens, and package that all into a cohesive checkout experience. And so what we let you do is we let you accept any form of payment in hours instead of spending years building out all of this plumbing infrastructure yourself.
Yeah. I feel like there are so many friction points onboarding, the average user onto Web3 that like, when we saw what you were doing, it was like, wow, this is the overhaul that the Web3 space needed. Yeah. So, one thing that really stood out for me when we first learned about you is that a lot of Web3 companies, they start out by focusing on crypto native users, and then they expand from there. They expand their market from there. But for Holiday, you took a different approach and you built for mainstream users from the get-go. Um, was there an internal debate about the initial traction versus market opportunity that you could be trading off? Like, what gave you the conviction that this is the time now for a solution like Holiday Payments?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we had early crypto native clients, and we found that their acute pain points were actually in attracting Web2 users. So, the crypto native market is relatively small in a number of users basis. And so when we talk to a lot of the crypto native applications, they have a loyal current user base, but they really want more net new people. And it turns out that most people in the world don't happen to have the token you want, and they don't have it in the place you want it to be, right? So they have to go through this complicated routing and execution process to get the value to your product or application. And so we saw this longer term opportunity. And I think this is really where we took the trade-off. We said we want to build for where we think the market will be in 2, 3, 5 years, build for this large venture opportunity instead of going after the short-term market, because it's this recognition that you can't just build blockchain products in isolation right now, right? We're in this transitionary phase from incumbent financial systems to this new upgraded financial system. But people aren't just going to take all of their money and all of their value and instantly port it over. The analogy I like to give is, we moved from on-prem to the cloud. Most of software actually still runs on-prem. We didn't just give up all of our on-prem data centers and delete everything and instantly go to the cloud. There was this, and this is still actually ongoing, where you make them work together. Then you start migrating data to the cloud, and then you start building new applications on the cloud. So you need that interstitial layer that can talk to both the incumbent systems and the new systems. And so we saw a large opportunity to play that role. We're not just connecting you to all of DeFi and every single blockchain. We're connecting you to every centralized exchange. We're connecting you to every bank, to every traditional rail, so you can have every way to pay in your application.
Can you share with us your traction on Holiday Payments? I know you made a lot of traction with Web3 gaming companies, but what other verticals have you captured and seen a lot of growth in?
Yeah, no, it's so I have over 35 clients now on our payments product, and the customer segments vary. We have blockchain games as sort of was our first passionate user segment. Now we're also seeing, broader just like ecosystems and people launching their own blockchains. One of our clients is Story Protocol. They created a new layer one. You can either go out and build all this plumbing yourself, or you can use a unified checkout experience like Halliday to power onboarding instantly. We also power the checkout experience for ApeChain, which is built by, the creators of Bored Ape, and that's more of an NFT ecosystem project. Now we're also starting to see, a different client segment emerge, which is the universe of Web2 fintech who now wants to build crypto products. So, sort of have these niche in crypto, more broad crypto companies, and now we're seeing even Web2 companies who want to deploy an application to 20 blockchains. And for that segment, it's really valuable to not have to rebuild all of this infrastructure for many different blockchains and virtual machines. For the fintech segment, we save them potentially 2 years of engineering time, and we give them a solution that works in a few hours.
I kind of want to zoom into the technology behind this because you've abstracted away all the complexities by offering multi-hop, multi-sediment. But like underneath the hood, can you share with the audience a bit about your technology approach? Like what technology enabled you to, stitch together all these rails across these multiple networks and to do that at scale?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think also, looking from a high level at our approach to technology on blockchain, we do not compromise on self-custody. We are 100% all in on building decentralized technology first. So we built this as a smart contract protocol. There's no, secret encrypted data off chain. There's no special hardware assumptions. This is all on chain engines and on-chain smart contracts orchestrating these workflows. And what we did is we built a workflow engine that is a smart contract that lets you stitch together actions and steps across many different blockchains. So we deploy this engine to Base, Arbitrum, OP, Solana, all the different blockchains. And that exposes a high level, low code way to perform actions across these different computing environments. And the value is it's all self-custodial, it's all trustless, and it's seamless.
Um, can you talk a bit about hash time lock, the technology approach for that?
Yes, yes. So we take advantage of the properties of hashes, and the property of hashing that we're using quite extensively is the fact that a hash is a commitment to a inputted data, right? A pre-image. And when you create a workflow, you commit to that workflow that's going to be done. And then we encode that in our workflow engine. And once that's committed to it, it cannot change. And so that's the really important property of our product is a user commits to this complicated multi-step intention or this workflow in sort of the way we like to refer to it. And then cryptographically, the engine enforces the rules that the user sets. And we use hashing among other cryptographic techniques to ensure that that is guaranteed as you go between chain to chain. And a time lock, all that means is if the workflow isn't done within a specific amount of time, the funds automatically get sent back to the originator of the workflow.
Mhm. Okay. So it's like a sequence of if-and statements.
Exactly. You can do more complicated things too. We let you outsource complicated routing logic while also keeping very strict constraints, right? You could say, hey, swap from Ethereum to USDC. I want at least this price, but go find me the best route. You can do that because we can rigorously define the constraints in that step. But largely it is, yeah, it's like do this, then do that. If this happens, do A. If that happens, do B. And you can create these large trees of actions. And that really saves you a tremendous amount of time from having to build this from a low level with Solidity and managing keys and relayers and all of that. The developer, all they see is that high level description.
Was that the core, was hash time lock the core reason why you were able to stitch all this together at scale? Or was there also like a combination of other approaches that you needed to, kind of interplay with hash time lock?
So it's certainly a combination of things. I think the time lock is just sort of like the escrow. And then hashing really is used for this idea of a global commitment, right? So a hash is is going to be the same hash no matter what blockchain you're on. And that's why hashes are helpful in a cross-chain context, because you're committing to data universally if you're all sharing the hash function. And so that's like a key cryptographic primitive. And many people rely on hashes, right? Like a lot of the cryptographic schemes you'll see on layer ones rely on hashing somewhere or the other. But the real thing that enables this is the engine. We have hashing, we use cryptographic commitment schemes, but the engine is what allows you to define a workflow and then execute it without having to worry about all the complexity, the fault tolerance, the integrations, the routing, and these things that usually take many, many months to build yourself.
So I want to segue into your latest launch, the Agentic workflow protocol. That was a product, I think, back when we were speaking, it wasn't live yet. So yeah, really excited by this new product. Tell us more about Agentic workflow protocol and like what inspired this latest launch.
Yeah, so all we're really doing here is letting the world build and see the underlying technology that we use in our checkout product. So behind payments, and this is actually one thing that we realized when developing a payments product, all the work we were doing was integrating different protocols, integrating different blockchains, and then stitching actions together into a unified execution engine. And so we have this really powerful and productive workflow engine. And that's what the workflow protocol is. And we said, hey, we want the world to go build products on the workflow engine. There are many things you can do that are not payments. We're focused on payments because that's our go-to-market. It's a great product. It drives customer value. But there are many workflows that one might want to do that are not necessarily encompassed by Halliday Payments. Maybe you want, like, we don't support certain treasury management use cases directly in our payments product, but maybe you want to build that yourself with custom logic. You can do that. If you want to build sophisticated recurring actions or rebalancing workflows or fee collection workflows across many different blockchains where you don't want to have to build custom infrastructure every time, that's where we become very valuable. And it's also this realization that, look, many people are building on-chain agents. Those agents need the arms and the legs to go do things. Right now, if you're building an agent, you have one choice, which is either it's going to form transactions itself and talk directly to all of these different components and manage that complexity, or it's going to write a smart contract just in time, or it will talk to a higher level set of tools. It's almost like MCP, where you can stitch together different protocols into sequences of actions. And that's exactly what we opened to the world. We said, hey, if you're building an AI product, build it on the workflow protocol and go from years to hours in development time. And that's really all we're saying is we have this great underlying technology. We think people should build other products on it.
Was this like pre-planned when you were working on Halliday Payments that like, okay, once we prove this out, we're gonna flip it and we're gonna open it up to protocols? Or was it like you worked on Halliday Payments and you realized that, the value underneath the hood is so valuable? This is a bigger market opportunity.
It's definitely the second, where we were building payments. We were building to the need. And we noticed as we were building it that we spent 95% of our time on this fundamental, I'll call it a computing problem, which is we spent all of our time integrating components. So there's this integration component. Then there's this component of composing different applications. Different DEXs have different interfaces. Different lending protocols, different bridges have different data formats. So it's not just integrating all these components, it's unifying their data formats into one backbone service. Then it's also executing reliably across all of these different components. And if you have 100 components, well, reliability actually becomes a very challenging thing to scale. And so we started working on that problem. And once we built all that, we said, well, that's a pretty general purpose tool. It's integrate, it's compose, and it's automate reliably. You can build a payments product with that technology, but you can also build many other things. And so we're still very focused on payments, but we also would love to encourage developers to build new products that are adjacent to payments that add value to applications.
Mm. Yeah, and I feel like your market opportunity just grew exponentially. Yeah.
Right. There are a million different workflows, and we would like to power all of them and make your life easier.
Mm. Um, so with like whenever whenever we come like AI agents is, now really, really like gaining a lot of momentum, but I think a broad concern that enterprises generally have with AI is around, the safety, the risk aspects about these systems, right? Like, how can I trust an AI to manage and move um, my user assets, especially on chain? So, how does your workflow protocol safeguard or address these hurdles?
Yeah, and this was actually a serendipitous consequence that their protocol is actually perfectly designed for this use case, which is, in building payments, we built the workflow protocol such that the workflow can only do what the user wants, and the user sets guardrails, right? You can say you can only spend this amount, you can only spend this asset, you can't convert for less than this exchange rate.
Mm,
So what we let you do and how this makes AI safe is the workflow protocol lets you set the walls, the boundaries of what can be done. And then
mm,
the AI within those boundaries can chain actions together,
mm,
but only if those actions satisfy the higher level constraints. So you get the best of both worlds here. You get sort of a rigorous attestation that what I want is either going to get done or it won't happen at all. And
mhm,
then when things start to get automated, you have this fuzzy system, which is an AI. So if it makes a mistake, it just won't get accepted on chain. And maybe the AI can retry and it can find clever solutions within these higher level Lego pieces.
mhm,
But the workflow engine having this built in is actually what makes this safe. But the alternative, right, is if an AI is writing smart contracts, well, smart contracts don't have those guardrails built in, right? It's actually quite the opposite. Like you need to audit your smart contracts.
mhm,
Tiny mistake in a smart contract can result in a catastrophic exploit.
mhm,
Workflow engine is for higher level actions. It doesn't give you the flexibility of
mhm,
solidity. But for most people who want to chain together business logic, they don't even want the lower level flexibility. They want to go from bridge to DEX to bridge to yield protocol. They want to do it on a compounding basis.
mhm,
Um, it's much more secure and it's much safer.
mhm, mhm. And for Web3 companies and developers that are interested in working with you, can you talk broadly about your pricing model for Halliday Payments and also for the Agentic workflow protocol?
Yeah, I mean, our business model for our payments product is quite simple.
Okay.
We're a B2B company. We work with all the way from SMBs to enterprise businesses. So we also build sort of boutique offerings based off of the needs of the customer. So we're hands-on. So we come up with a package that meets your needs. But generally, it's the combination of a platform fee
Mhm,
and a share of the GMV on a sort of per payment basis when we're talking about payments.
mhm,
And then when it comes to workflows, it's a pay-as-you-go model, right? A workflow costs some amount of computation. There's some complexity in carrying that out. It's almost like paying gas on Ethereum, right? You pay for the compute you use. If you're using Amazon, you pay for the compute you use.
mhm,
If you build a complicated workflow, you pay for the compute you use.
mhm, mhm. And what's the status of the agentic workflow protocol? Is it like still in private beta or like um, is it, live now?
So the underlying technology is live, and that's been live for
Mhm,
as long as we've had payments. And the underlying workflow engine is battle tested in production with large clients.
mhm,
Uh, Letting people build custom workflows. We're working directly with businesses right now
mhm,
with design partners. And the main reason we're doing that is we want to provide a hands-on experience when we're unbundling this technology from the primary product, and
mhm,
then work towards a standard set of tooling for building workflows as they're unbundled from this unified product experience. So we don't want to go get ahead of ourselves and give people the low level workflow without the adequate tooling. So we're finding those visionary clients and partners who really want this underlying technology, who are willing to be partners with us and develop a sort of emergent developer platform.
Mm, mm. And like with, the momentum from TradFi, with institutional crypto adoption, um, in these last 2 years, has that impacted the trajectory of each of your product suites?
It has certainly. I mean, we see a lot of interest from TradFi. We see a lot of interest from Web2 fintechs, and it's primarily along the angle of, hey, I want to offer financial service. I see there's 20 different blockchains. There's all of these different products and services. Where do I get started? How do I get all this expertise and talent at my company? And my competitors have been out for a year, so I really need to move quickly.
Mm,
That's where we become perfect because our platform is really, you can think of it almost as a control tower over the different products and services that are offered on chain. We let you integrate everything with one integration, and we let you build your business logic and your workflows with one integration. And so if you need payments as an enterprise, you can use payments. If you need something more custom, you can use our underlying workflow engine. And oftentimes people use both, right? You initially buy payments and then you want to add something custom on top, and that's a pathway that we really like at the company, actually.
Oh, I wanted to rewind a bit. So, when you were building Holiday Payments, right? How long did it take for you to get that checkout experience that you wanted? Because, um, I recalled reading your blog about how you lost the deal because back then you couldn't do recurring payments. So,
Yes.
how was the development time? Like, how long did you spend before, you had all the composability, all the functionality that made you ready to ship? Yeah.
Yeah, so it certainly went in stages, and we're not done. And so this is the complexity of even when you talk about just checkout, just payments in my application. Well, there are a lot of countries in the world. There are a lot of local payment methods. There's a lot of centralized exchanges. There are a lot of DEXs, a lot of blockchains, a lot of virtual machines. The list goes on. And we're still actually building out that core suite of tools and payment methods. It's been over 2 years, and we've raised $26 million, and we have experts in the field in San Francisco and New York City, which are sort of locus points for this kind of talent. It's a really hard problem. And so if you're doing this from scratch, you've got, a 2 year timeline, and you're spending between, $5 to $15 million to build this out in a scalable, repeatable way. And that's sort of what we say to people. It's like, you know, if you're not in the business of software maintenance and payments plumbing, you really should not be building this yourself. You should be focusing on your business logic and your application. And we've got years of work to do. And that's why we're still growing the team and growing how much we can deploy.
Mhm. Who do you see as your biggest competitors today? And what do you think is the moat of your business?
So I still will sort of take the perspective that from a competition standpoint,
Mhm.
in this stage of the market,
Mhm.
it's sort of like the YC advice, which is, oftentimes it's not competitors who kill a startup. It's the fact that the startup just doesn't find customers. And I think blockchain is there as a whole, where it's the more important thing is connecting to where people are and is getting the users onboarded in the first place. Sort of the competition is, I don't want to change anything, and I'm just going to use my Visa card. I'm not going to go on chain at all because I have no reason to use on chain products. And so we're trying to blur that barrier between the on chain experience and the off chain experience. And our moat is, one is the breadth of the integrations and the reliability of everything we're building, right? It's this sort of recursive process where the more customers we have, the more feedback we get, the more integrations we do, the more revenue we have, the more we can grow the team. So we just sort of reach an economy of scale. Um, And the second thing is, we're a computing platform. Uh, People are going to start building packages, standard libraries. You can connect to every application. Like every integration we build makes every other integration more valuable. So you get this flywheel effect around the protocol as it scales. But we're still just very focused on understanding the customer. I think at the end of the day, we're in service of the customer, and our job is to understand and deeply understand the pain points of those in the market. And our real edge will be us being customer obsessed consistently, growing our revenue, growing our margins, and then scaling.
Mhm. 5 years from now, like, what do you think when someone makes their first like blockchain transaction? What do you think the experience will look like? How do you think that users will be interacting with Web3 infrastructure?
Yeah, I think your first transaction in 5 years, there's a good chance
Mhm.
it'll be a one-click process or sort of a face scan through Face ID
Mhm.
with your current digital wallet. So I don't think the way people are going to pay or where they're going to store their value, I don't think that will change dramatically. But what I do think will happen is that all of those current distribution channels will integrate stable coins in the back end. We'll connect to blockchain just enough to be the perfect gateway to crypto. An example would be like, maybe you bank with Bank of America. And
Mhm.
in the future, all it takes to buy in is scan, click approve in my Bank of America app. I have a stable coin. It hits a
Mhm.
Halliday workflow. It buys the asset you want. It just all happens instantly. You
Mhm.
don't need to re-KYC. You don't need to go through a 15, 20-minute onboarding process, have a
Mhm.
30% chance you're going to get denied.
Mhm.
It'll just all work through the synergy between the existing rails and
Mhm.
the new rails. And I think that's going to take many years to iron out.
Yeah, true. Because like right now, like our digital assets and our fiat is completely separate. Yeah. Um, uh, I kind of want to circle back a bit to you because you have such a deep breadth and depth in both AI and blockchain. Um, can you share with us like what do you like most and least about characteristics of Web3 and what you like most and least about AI? And like how has that kind of shaped your approach to developing a Web3 product?
Yeah, that's a very good question.
Mm,
Well, I think immediately what comes to mind in
mhm,
the relation of AI and Web3 and how Web3 views AI, I do think there's this false dichotomy between Web3 and AI.
mm,
Web3 and blockchain is one of the few industries who treats Web3 X AI as its own thing. Like most areas of software, just like, yep, AI is like compute, we'll put it in. It's not like software X AI is its own category of SaaS. Like if you
mm,
use a CRM, they all have AI now. There's not like
mm,
CRM X AI. And
mm,
and I think this sort of hesitance to include AI or to resegment it in this way is not super productive. And
mm,
in the sense that I think it's almost led blockchain to fall a little bit behind the incumbent SaaS industry.
mm,
Because my concern is that in 5 years, when all of traditional SaaS has all the agentic tooling you'd expect,
mhm,
that crypto feels like 2017 SaaS, where it's like it's really good, it's
mhm,
refined, the user experiences are great, but they're not agentic because we had this sort of like, oh, you need to be a crypto AI business. You can't just be a crypto business that uses AI. And I think the proper way to think about AI is it's like networking, it's like storage, it's like compute. Name a single application today that doesn't have networking, storage, or compute. It's very few. Most applications connect to the internet. And intelligence is one of those things where I think you can apply it almost everywhere. And maybe there are different user experiences that put it up front in the same way that, a network first streaming app, right, is sort of really relying on the networking component. But I don't think there needs to be as much of a like, oh, this is Web3, oh, that's AI. These are two different things. AI is sort of a super cycle technology that will impact every technological discipline, including Web3. Um, and I think one of the things about Web3 that I think is challenging is that building decentralized technology is very hard. And it's one of those things where it's we believe in a positive externality. That's the way I like to frame it. Like decentralized technology has a positive externality.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it's almost on the role of government to incentivize decentralization because the market equilibrium is not necessarily decentralization because it's so much harder to build truly decentralized products. And it's hard for people to tell the difference between a centralized and a decentralized product. Sometimes centralized products actually have better user experiences than decentralized products. But we've also seen how that can go wrong in the past. And I think the challenge is going to be aligning enough stakeholders and enough national governments to bridge the gap and say, no, we believe in decentralization, but if and only if these things are truly decentralized. And that's just a different sort of problem space than traditional technology. It's almost like it's almost a social coordination problem more so than it is a technological problem.
Um, what I think you kind of addressed that, but like, what changes do you want to see for the Web3 ecosystem?
I think the one of the most important things, and I think this is happening right now in the US, is market structure regulation. I think it's time that the industry get regulated. I think that'll be very positive for the industry. I actually think it'll incentivize the right things we want for those exact reasons I was describing. And I think the most critical thing in my mind is, do we define decentralization well in market structure, in just the different global regulations? Because this technology has the power to do a lot of good in the world, to open access, to give people sovereignty, but we have to protect and incentivize its development. And this is happening right now. I mean, we have the Clarity Act in the House. You know, the Genius Act is making progress in the U.S. Congress. You know, you have MICA in Europe, and that's super encouraging because that also unlocks the rest of the world and the rest of regulated industry, where there's a lot of users and a lot of people and a lot of capital that can finally come in as well. So this sort of takes us from niche to mainstream if these laws are written correctly.
Um, what's next for Halliday in terms of your strategic priorities for this year and maybe, you know, the medium term? Yeah.
Yeah, we are incredibly focused on making payments the best way to check out on blockchain. So for any app that's on a layer 2, any app that's accepting crypto payments, we want to make this the best way to check out. And then we're also building and making the workflow engine more robust. And it's also my opinion that if you don't have a top-notch application, it's hard to build a top-notch protocol, because to learn how to build a great protocol, you need to have a lot of users on your application. So these two things are very synergistic. The better our product does, the better the protocol is. And so for where we are very focused on the customer, making our customers happy, making their users happy with a great checkout experience. And that's going to be our focus for the next year.
What has been the most and least rewarding about being, you know, a startup founder?
Yeah, well, I think the most rewarding element is just sort of the act of creation. I think that's very, like, it is the way we have structured our civilization, where you can organize and actually create things. Like a company is the way you build things in real life, and that's just the structure we have aligned on. You know, there are other vehicles, right? You know, maybe like a 501(c)(4 and these different, but they're all sort of broadly like human organizations, and that's how humans build things. And I have opinions, and I would love to see them reflected in reality. And I think this is the way you do it. And I think that's a very exciting and rewarding process. I think the downside is that it's excruciatingly difficult to do that because there's a lot of just entropy in the world. What can't go wrong will go wrong. And so like you're starting a company, get ready for that. And then there's resistance, right? You hear no a lot of the time. And so you just have to be incredibly persistent, and that's difficult to hear no. But I've been doing this for 3 years, so I'm used to it now.
And is this your first like company as a founder?
So prior to Halliday, I worked on an ed tech business and tried to sell large risk-averse universities new AI-based tooling. But this is my first venture-backed company, yes.
Okay. Like, because the theme of Redefine this year is like building through cycles. So what suggestions would you give founders on building a sustainable business and product proposition that, will truly scale and be, how do you say, not sensitive to, up cycles and down cycles. Yeah, not vulnerable to, the ups and downs of the crypto market volatility. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question because I do think the greatest risk in the crypto market, especially for a founder, is not necessarily to get distracted in a bear market. You don't have the luxury to be distracted in a bear market. Like you got to execute or you're going out of business. I think one of the challenges is actually staying focused in a bull market. I think, and this is maybe unique to crypto where, people sometimes they lose sight of the customer in a bull market. And at the end of the day, customer pays the bills. And if you don't make customers happy, you're probably not going to have a sustainable, successful long-term business. And I think the most important thing is just to, and it's not exactly controversial advice. It's like, this is what Paul Graham has always said. It's listen to your customers, build what they want, rinse, repeat. But I think this is a classic mistake to make is like, oh, it's a bull market, ignore your customers, chase a narrative. But there are a lot of, I've been through a few cycles now, and I know a lot of businesses have done that and they no longer exist. And a lot of businesses who've been silent and just executed and shipped value to their clients. And those businesses have become very successful.
And is there anything that we should be expecting from Halliday? Any new product launches, partnerships you would like to share for those interested in working with you? Like, could you, let the audience know how they could reach you?
Yeah. We're actually releasing a new version of our payments product and our checkout experience very soon. And that's very exciting. That comes with a whole slew of new features and enhancements, better pricing, user experience, reliability, new payment methods. And it's really just going to be a massive unlock as we scale that from, 10 to 100. And then, yeah, if you want to, people want to get in touch, either go to our website and you can book a call there at Halliday, HALLIDAY.xyz, or feel free to email me directly at Griffin, GRIFFIN, at halliday.xyz as well.
Thank you so much, Griffin. It's a pleasure. It's been so much fun. Thank you for your time, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.